if that should happen, I would reach over to the groom and say, are you sure about this? Do we really think that wearing burlap sack to the wedding with Jesus Christ is the appropriate dress? What I'm saying to you is, do you really think that you don't need to do anything to serve the Lord? That you just get saved and that's it? Or should we not be ministering in the name of Jesus Christ and reaching out and sharing with others, witnessing to others? Now, the book of Revelation is about all of those things that will happen in the last days, but it's also about those things that ought to happen in the present day. And to be prepared, God says that we need to do some things. And finally the big day comes and you're sitting there and you've heard the pre-service music and then you hear those chords, dum, dum, bum, 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 and everybody stands and the bride enters and the wedding begins. Every once in a while I've had a groom in his nervous energy to say, what am I supposed to do? Hands front, back, what do I do? And I said, just look at your bride. Focus on the bride. And the groom stands there in his excitement, anticipation, and he watches his friends walk down this aisle. He watches the attendants walk down this aisle, but it's all about the bride who is about to enter. And Jesus Christ is so excited about that moment. He chose you to be his bride. And God has lined up everything for that wonderful day. The angels of heaven begin to sing, the trumpets blast, and he looks to see the bride. And she enters. She is nothing but beauty and perfection. No man in his right mind, has ever married a woman who was not, in his own eyes, the epitome of beauty and perfection. Because love is blind. Love does not see the little flaws. Love does not see the things that do not measure up. Love accepts. And it is as if she is the most beautiful person in the world. And she is absolutely the kind of person with whom I want to spend the rest of my life. That's what God was talking about in verse 15 and following. Verse 15, the angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates and its walls. The city was laid out like a square as long as it was wide. He measured the city with a rod and found it to be 1,500 miles in length, and as wide and high as it is long. The wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. The foundations of the city walls were decorated with every kind of precious stone. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. The great street of the city was of pure gold, like transparent glass. Wow. You see, John was seeing what Jesus saw. Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. Now let me tell you what it's like. And John said it's absolutely precious, priceless, perfect. I so enjoyed telling a story at Mark Huguenon's funeral week before last. Mark was a volunteer at Memorial Hospital, and he loved doing his job. Always very, very helpful. If ever you came into the hospital as a patient for a procedure, then Mark was likely one of the red coat guys that you would have met. But one day someone came into that entrance and asked Mark, where's the hospital credit union? And the Memorial Hospital is really laid out in a weird way. There's several floors, and then there's a ground floor, and the floors don't necessarily match up. You've got ramps and everything else, and there's an old building and the new building and everything. So you can't get from where Mark was to the where the credit union is in a direct path. So Mark said, hey, why don't I just take you? And so Mark took the person to the credit union, and then he returned to his station. Only later, Mark realized that the man he took to the credit union robbed the credit union. Now, how's that? And I love telling that story because I think if Mark Huguenin were here on this earth right now, and he was volunteering at Memorial Hospital, and someone came into him and said, where's the credit union? I think he'd do the same thing again. Not because he's not smart, but because Mark looked at people and saw them through himself. It never occurred to Mark that someone could be that dishonest, because Mark was a man who was very trusting and trustworthy. He saw others through himself. And that's exactly what Jesus Christ does for us. When we stand before God in our commitment to Jesus Christ, God will only see the righteousness of his Son, because that righteousness will overlay all of our sin. And in God's sight, we will be beautiful and perfect. And now the wedding is over. We're ready for the honeymoon. Matt, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're one of the last weddings I did. The honeymoon phase of your marriage, is it still going on? The answer would be, okay. Well, I'm not sure how the word honeymoon got started. I think maybe some of the explanations are not acceptable or palatable to most Baptists. One explanation is that the groom would go kidnap his bride, and then he would hide her until her family quit looking for her. Woo! So like, Lord, did that happen to you? Yeah, so that's one explanation of honeymoon, and you check the language. There's another tradition that says when the bride and groom were married, the father of the bride had to give a honey beer to the newlyweds for the first lunar month of their marriage, hence honeymoon. So, and you can find all kinds of traditions. But one thing we probably would agree on is that honeymoon is that initial stage of marriage, which eventually comes to an end, and things change. Things return to normal. We use the concept when we talk about a job. After we've been there a few days, everybody's so nice and helpful, and then the honeymoon's over. You have a honeymoon relationship with your car until you get the payment book, and then the honeymoon's over. Everything returns to normal. Now, what if that should happen in your relationship with Jesus Christ? Because I've seen people who've walked the aisle, given their life to Jesus, and they have just wept out of joy that he would receive them. But I've also seen many of those people that just returned to normal. And look around. If the honeymoon had not ended for these believers, this sanctuary would be packed right now. But the honeymoon's over. And like a bride and groom in a bad earthly relationship, We, the bride, take our groom for granted. We don't show up. We don't do anything with him. We don't express our love to him. We don't talk to him. And you got to work. You got to keep the relationship with Jesus Christ alive and vibrant and exciting. That's what it's all about. But let's take that and say, is it possible that when the Lord returns and we all get to heaven, that some of us are going to sit around and say, I'm getting a little bored with this.